Hello and welcome to the Moonshine Jesus Show. We're really glad that you have joined us for this newest episode where we will be looking at Stranger Things Season 4, Volume 1. Most importantly, though, you'll be joining me along with my good buddy, Caleb. How's it going, Caleb?
It's going great, Mark. How are you doing today?
I am doing just fine, except this is, like I said, we're doing Stranger Things. There are so many characters, and you know how I struggle with all these names. It's going to be
there are a lot of names.
It's going to be interesting. There are a lot, but we'll muddle through this together. I'm sure we'll be fine. But a little business up front. We are sponsored by progressivechristianity.org. We really encourage you to check them out. There are over 6,600 pieces of resource there for progressive
6,000.
It's crazy. So we do seriously invite you. I think you would enjoy, if you haven't checked them out, you would enjoy what the offerings are there. Also, make sure you check us out on Facebook, the Moonshine Jesus Show. Follow us there. Also, on whatever you stream your podcast for, make sure that you sign up for the Moonshine Jesus Show. And most importantly, as we enter into a show like this, let us be reminded that much like the Demogorgons, spoilers are everywhere in these shows. So, this is not a spoiler-free episode. It never will be, never has been, but it's going to be a lot of fun. So one of the things we always do, we start off with a themed drink. I am excited to find out, Caleb, what your drink is.
Okay, so I was excited about this. I love Stranger Things, and we were kind of talking about doing this, and I started thinking, what kind of a drink do we need? Well, one of the key parts of Stranger Things, as you know, is the Upside Down, the alternate dimension. And so I've got a drink here, the Upside Down. It's not quite as red as I hoped it would be, but it's but it's fun. It's vodka and simple syrup. And lime juice and blackberries. And so you can see kind of the blackberries floating around, much like the particles in the Upside Down. And I've got black licorice in here too. Kind of, and look, I've got a tree for my garnish. It's I don't think haunted or anything, but it does. And I've got black licorice and blackberries on that. So the Upside Down, and
I love it. I love it.
How about you, Mark?
I am paying homage to what, at least if it's not, if this person is your favorite character, it's at least one of each person's amongst their favorite characters. I am having a drink called the 11. Here it is right here. You can see the Eggo waffle as my garnish.
That's perfect.
On the top. Don't you like that?
I love it.
This is whiskey, egg whites, lemon juice, maple syrup, and some bitters. I haven't tried it yet. I just put it together, so I'm gonna try it right now.
Tell me, how is it?
That's really nice, man.
Is it good?
It reminds you of breakfast, but a little bit of lemony brightness along with it. So it's kind of fun. All right, Caleb, we're going to enjoy these drinks as the show goes on.
That's right.
But the show must go on. So let's take a quick break. Yes, indeed. We'll take a quick break, and we'll be back after this.
Cheers.
Moonshine Jesus. Moonshine Jesus. Moonshine Jesus. Moonshine Jesus. Won't you shine a light?
Hello and welcome back to the Moonshine Jesus Show, where today we are talking about Stranger Things Season 4, Volume 1. Just a reminder, we're going to geek out here for a little bit, and then in our next segment, we will be talking more about the theological and political aspects of Stranger Things, so stay tuned if that is your thing. But right now, we're going to geek out a little bit. Stranger Things is the sci-fi, fantasy, horror, 80s nostalgia series that follows a group of teens and the adults in their lives as they try to fight off monsters from another dimension from their small town of Hawkins, Indiana. Warren Lunsford reminds us that Demogorgons is a nice word, and there are lots of nice words because they use Dungeons and Dragons to make sense
Oh,
of these strange things in their
yeah.
world. So you kind of got to be a nerd to really appreciate it. So Stranger Things began in 2016. We're now on season 4. It's been around in 3 years or so, I think, since we got
Mhm.
our last installment because of COVID. And then season 4 dropped a little over a week ago. Now, Mark, I don't know if you
Yes.
know this or not, but
Mm.
Stephen King is apparently
Yes.
a huge fan of the show. But
Oh.
he had one complaint about this season.
Mm.
And the complaint that he had was he was mad that it was divided into
Right.
2 different parts, and he's gonna have
I
to
was
wait until July to
I
find out
would
what
have
happens
guessed
next.
I would have guessed that was his problem because I actually, yeah, it was a problem for me too. I was like, you got to be kidding
Was
me.
it?
I thought we were going to get the whole, what are they doing to us? That's not right. It's
Yeah.
just not
So
right, man.
you were frustrated that you had to go out kind of on a cliffhanger, wondering what was gonna happen next.
Yeah, and this is one of the things I don't like
Yeah.
about how it's part of a business, and
Mhm.
Netflix is
It
struggling right
is.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Netflix is struggling right now, and they've always dropped the full season for us. I'm not
They
saying that's a
have.
great
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's a great business model because it stopped working, but
But we're
they've been doing
spoiled.
that,
Mhm.
and we certainly
Mhm.
were expecting that. But they've realized that the weekly drop kind of thing, the kind of cliffhangers that bring people in, and then that means
Yeah.
social media people are talking about it for a longer time.
Yeah.
And I
Mhm.
really feel like that we're victims of their poor business planning, frankly.
We're victims of all these other streaming services, which are wonderful. I mean, we're getting incredible content,
Oh
but
yeah.
at the same, there's always good things and bad things about it.
Mhm.
But I want to know
Right.
this, Mark. I want to
Yeah.
know what your overall impression of the season was. What did you think about season 4? Did you like it?
Well, here's the thing. I know
There's
that a
always
lot
a
of
thing with you, Mark.
I know.
You've always
That's
got a
true.
thing.
This
Okay.
is very true. I cannot help
Yeah.
myself.
What's the
Listen,
thing?
everybody, I've heard so many people who think it might even be the best season so far. And I
Mhm.
certainly think production value is way up and crazy good.
Mhm.
I also think that there is a lot of world making that goes on this season that
Mhm.
we didn't
Mhm.
get
Yeah.
in the earlier first, which is all lovely.
Yeah.
But my real thing is, I feel like there's too many storylines. They're too spread out, and they're except for the world building that happens in them. I felt like they were underdeveloped storylines. There's a bunch of them, and even the main one feels kind of a singular in tone. So I'm
Yeah.
excited. I enjoyed it, but I don't know that I think it's the best season the way that everyone else does.
Okay, so I agree with you on this.
Oh, okay. Wow. Hey,
So
this is
I
good.
had a similar reaction because the beauty of Stranger Things has always been, I think, the ability to tie multiple storylines together and to
Mhm.
have all of those storylines kind of
Yes.
come together at just the right point, climax at
Mhm.
just the right point. And I think this is part of like the Duffers' love letter to the 80s that we see here.
Oh, it absolutely is.
The storylines come together at the same point. I love it, but I agree with you. I think that one of the reasons that's been possible in previous seasons is that the storylines were more closely related and it was
Yes.
easier to follow. And so if you've got one storyline taking place in Russia, and for a while a separate storyline taking place like in Alaska, and then a
Right.
storyline taking place in California, and one
California,
taking
and
place
then back in
in Hawkins. It's a
Right.
lot to keep track of. And I think that they didn't pull it together quite as, granted the season's not over yet, but they didn't pull it together quite as neatly as they did in the third season, which is my favorite season. I loved the third season.
Completely agree. Third season is the best. Nathan
Yeah.
Hall, one of Watching Live, is saying he's never
Mhm.
even seen one episode. He's got to start watching it, and I agree. I don't want us.
You do.
I don't want our talking about the fourth season not being quite everything that has been hyped up to be. It was still a great season.
It was
Nathan,
fantastic.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I
Should
didn't mean to
watch it.
say that it wasn't great because it was, and there was a lot of meat in the fourth season. There was a lot going on, and one of the cool things about the fourth season is that you get answers to a lot of questions
Right.
that we've been wondering, which was one of the cool things. So, what did you think about the answers that we got in the
Well,
fourth
you know,
season.
I'm actually more. One of the things that I find the most intriguing about the answers is the what the questions that the answers are for, and not in the storyline.
Yeah.
I really feel like the Duffer Brothers are working hard to talk about, and we can get to this possibly in our next segment. I feel like they're working really hard to talk about transparency in government and the dangers of not having it. And
I wonder why. During the time when this was written, I can't think of a single reason.
Doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make any sense. But I do like that they've done it, and honestly, it seems to be a theme of theirs anyway. So I kind of like that. I like that we're kind of finding out more about the Upside Down. I love the connection that we're getting with Dungeons and Dragons, actually, and I do want to. As a matter of fact, I'm going to kick off our next segment touching on that a little bit.
You're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, D&D. Have you ever played D&D?
Yes, and we will. I was part of the '80s group that were playing this, and part of a conservative Christian family when I started doing that. So there's tales to be told there, and I think they fit really nicely in our next episode. Our next segment. So we'll save that for a bit. What questions were you excited to get the answers to?
Well, so I was excited to find out more about what happened with 11. So at the beginning of this season, we get a teaser that makes it look like 11 has killed a lot of the people who are in the Hawkins lab. And so we get some answers to what really happened there, and we get some answers as to who Vecna is. So Vecna is the big bad of season 4, and
another D&D shout out. Vecna comes
D&D
straight
character.
from and named after the creator Vance. So they just rearranged the letterings there. I'm sorry, I am a D&D geek, so go ahead. Sorry.
You are. Continue.
But continue.
So I love to see. So we haven't really gotten answers in previous seasons as to who and so we get some answers there, and we see how 11 is tied into that. So that's pretty cool. But here's the question that I think is really interesting that we don't get any answers to yet, and that's one of the things that's been it's one of the things that's been the most talked about online, and that's Will Byers and his sexuality. That's something that's actually, kind of at the forefront and is explored a little bit. And we even saw last week the actor who plays Will Byers has been, kind of standoffish about trying to answer questions about his character's sexuality. And last week he tweeted that he's hoping for I'm trying to remember what they call it online, Byers and Wheeler relationship. So there
it's very clear.
What do you think? What do you think's happening?
It's very clear that he has a crush on Mike, but I don't think that necessarily tells us any of the full story of what his sexuality is and what his orientation is. I think it would be fun for them to explore that more, except in season 1. I feel like they have underplayed his character for a while. I think he was central in that season, and increasingly so he seems to be becoming a side character, which I think is unfortunate. He's a very interesting character, and there's so much that could be explored in a healthy way that the world needs exploring right now, particularly in a month like this. I mean, they're releasing it the week before Pride Month, so there's so much that could be explored. I certainly hope they explore that more. They do feel like they could be setting it up, but we only have 2 episodes for the finale. They're long ones.
Feature length episodes.
So I don't know what they're going to go for, but I definitely would like to see them do a lot more with that character, and particularly, there's so much story that could be explored by looking at a kid in the 80s. That's the part we got to keep going back and reminding ourselves. That's right. Experiencing attraction to someone that is not an opposite sex in a society that and this is, we're going to get to, I promise, in the next segment, about religious tolerance and what it might have looked like back then, and some of the commentaries made. This is yet another perfect opportunity to make some commentary on that and show how destructive it can be in terms of this very kind of a fundamentalist approach to religion, and then trying to force it on society.
That's true, because it's both in the 80s and in a small town in Indiana, and
Yeah.
it is not from everything I've heard, it's not easy to come out anyway, and it's especially not
Right.
easy to come out in a small town in the
Yeah.
80s in Indiana.
Yeah.
so
can-
so
you-
I
yeah.
agree. I agree that the Byers character has been kind of underplayed, and he was just a recurring character in the first season. But you're right, did play a central role, and is kind of sidelined. And maybe this is kind of a casualty of what we talked about earlier, which was so many storylines going on at the same time that it's
Yeah.
hard to really do any justice to any of the storylines fully, except.
Mm.
I think that Max got some
Yeah.
some good quality screen time that she hadn't
Absolutely.
got before. And
And-
what do
and,
you think? What do you think about
I lo-
that?
I-
What do you think about Max?
I think it's great. I love the character of Max,
Uh-huh.
and having 11 is a strong female character, but in a very specific
Yes.
way.
She's got
it's almost-
superpowers.
It's almost not by choice, right?
Right.
And Max is this great, very
Mhm.
heroic, really, kid who is female and is making the difficult choices over and over again, being the strong person, making the hard decisions, and is such a likable character. On top of it, I love that they've introduced what was the last year that we got introduced last season to Mad Max at that point, who's beating us on the video games all the time. And so I really like the character. I mean, how about you? What are your thoughts on her?
I thought she was really interesting. I thought they gave her a lot more depth this season, and I thought that was really good because she's been kind of a sidelined character too. I mean, she was introduced in season 2, and she's always been independent, but also was somewhat defined by her relationship with Lucas, and she wasn't this season. And I think one of the cool things that we got to see explored was PTSD. I think. And so even though she wasn't close to her stepbrother, right, she suffered from PTSD throughout the whole season and depression that resulted from that. And I thought that was a very interesting way to explore that and to see how that impacted her. Absolutely. And I thought the fact that we got to see the season really spending some time with students, teens who were going through some really tough time. That's who Vecna chooses to attack, right? Is the people who are already vulnerable. And I think that speaks volumes about the way that that folks who are dealing with mental health struggles are often, are often victimized, especially in the what can be a cruel high school setting. So we got to see that explored with Max.
Absolutely. And I like that they developed it. I do feel like that throughout this show, we've seen them kind of beginning to explore just response to trauma in general, because everything that's happening here is traumatic, from people disappearing to deaths to, I mean, it is a very traumatic show, and we do get to see its impact on people. And I felt like this season did a better job kind of beginning to explore that and maybe show folks dealing with it head on. Whereas before they just kind of hinted at it, I felt like.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think that was good because, and even to explore the complexity of how that can all look, because, Max even says in season 4, I tried to be happy for a while, and I just couldn't. And so it's a reminder that, that depression and PTSD doesn't always look sad, and it doesn't always but it's not something that can be easily defined. And so I thought it was cool that we got to see some of that explored in this season. So we're already kind of starting to move, Mark, I think, to some of the theopolitical issues. There's a lot of cool stuff. There's a lot of stuff we can geek out on. You could talk about Dungeons and Dragons.
We're going to do that.
You could tell.
We're definitely going to do that a little bit. But just before we do this switch, that you were so artful.
You can tell. I'm trying until you get us there.
Oh, you are artfully leading us there. I just need to geek out on one last
something
thing.
else. Okay. Geek out.
There's one last thing, and it will take but a second. I just loved that Vecna has these kind of Freddy Krueger overtones.
Yeah, we didn't even talk about Freddy Krueger. Yeah,
Robert England ends up in
Is
a guest
in it.
starring role,
yeah.
and he is so good. I don't want us to not at least point out what a joy it was to see him and the role that he played, and I love that the Duffer Brothers basically give a nice tip of the hat to him, since they based loosely the character on his Freddy Krueger character. It was just brilliant. I mean, did it not make you smile from ear to ear when you saw him show up?
It totally did, and
Right,
so, because I mean, it's clear that Vecna is based partially on Freddy Krueger. I mean, he's attacking people in dream sequences and all of this kind of stuff. And so
there's even moments where his fingers extend almost like
they're elongated, yeah. And so it's cool then, again, not a spoiler-free zone, that Vecna's dad is the actor who plays Freddy Krueger. Very cool. Very cool. Yeah. I loved it. I did smile from ear to ear. My wife and I kind of looked at each other. We're like, is that? Did they? Like instantly. Right. Yeah. Instantly looked up. So let's see if I can artfully do this again, Mark.
All right.
We have geeked out. It has been fun.
Indeed.
There is a lot we could geek out. We've got 4 seasons of a very kind of geeky pop culture show that is also awesome, and we would love to geek it out. But there's more than geeking out to do. There's a lot of like social issues. There are a lot of theopolitical issues that we can explore, and so we're going to right after we get back from the drop.
Moonshine Jesus, Moonshine Jesus, Moonshine Jesus, Moonshine Jesus, won't you shine a light?
Thanks for sticking with us here on the Moonshine Jesus Show. You are entering into our Theopoliticos segment of the show. So, Caleb, there's so much that we could be talking about in this segment, but I want to at least start in the space that we've hinted at a couple of times in the last episode, and I want to do it through a new character that we only see briefly.
Yeah,
the captain of the basketball team, Jason. Okay, so there's this scene, I can't remember now, is it a town hall or whatever, where they're basically calling out Dungeons and Dragons, and
it's of Satan.
It is of Satan, yes, which is very real. So I'll give you like I said, in the 80s, I was a Dungeons and Dragons player. I absolutely loved it. I was a big sci-fi fantasy reader, and for me, this was like getting to tell our own stories. It was so much fun, and I was also attending a Southern Baptist church at the time. At least to begin with. And my parents had their concerns because there was this real scare that we see them talk a little bit about in the show. Of this is of Satan. And there was lots of different reasons for that, because Dungeons and Dragons looked at mythology, they looked at Christian thought and Christian characters, and they used it all and integrated it all. And there were sometimes covers of the rule books that would have very satanic looking characters on it. But I feel like while that's kind of the surface of what's going on, the Duffer Brothers are a little more sophisticated than just saying, "Oh, look at this thing that happened. Isn't it terrible?" I feel like one of the things going on, and it hit me really hard in that scene where Jason is basically villainizing all of these folks. And it has to do with the dangers of religion, particularly I would say fundamentalist religion, to when they don't understand something, they look at it through an interpretation that's built around their religion, and the key being that they don't actually understand it, and in trying to figure out how it fits in their world, use their religion to be judgmental about something they don't understand. Does that ever happen? I mean,
never. Never.
No.
I've never seen it. So I think one of the biggest problems, right, is that those folks also often don't understand the Bible, and so they use the Bible in a way that that just exactly what you hint at, just justifies their own prejudices. And so I think it's unfortunate that we see that. About things even more significant than just than the games that people are playing, but the ways we see people using the Bible to villainize people who are different than them, just because they kind of exist outside their own realm of experience, or they're just they're afraid of what those people represent. So we are in June, we are in Pride Month, and I think one of the ways that we, as you mentioned earlier, and I think one of the ways that we see this manifest most often is against the LGBT community, right? That we see people say, well, you know, that's not the way that I think it should be, and so I'm going to try to use the Bible to justify my own prejudice against these folks. Yeah, even though Jesus doesn't speak a single word of condemnation about folks in the LGBT community. So yeah, you're right. We see it all the time. All the time.
We see it all the time. And it's interesting, like going back to my own personal story. So my parents knew that I was playing. They were seeing, because I can't remember, was it whatever magazine in the show that they read from, Newsweek or
from
something.
Time, I think, or Newsweek,
Time or Newsweek. But those were actual articles that got published, and it was based around falsehood. Ultimately, people disappeared, and they blamed it on D&D, and it turned out that they really were just running away from home or got lost or all kinds of different things. But the truth, the reality didn't matter, because there was this false fear, this false way of building up that we're more important and better than people, and there's something horrible going on, and isn't it great that we're here to judge it and point it out for you, so that you don't have to suffer the horrors of having anyone in your life involved in something horrible. But where I'm going with this is, so my parents were aware of all of that. Yeah. But instead of putting their foot down and just going, no way, no, we're not going to. We're not losing our son to a demigorgon. We're not losing it to a mind play. Like we instead of doing that, they said, okay, this is important to you. Talk to us about what happens. Show us what you're using. Show us those books, and tell us what you think about them. And I think I learned a lot seeing my parents, who, while we were early on in that, we're still in a conservative Baptist church, we're beginning to recognize that what they were being told didn't match up with their feelings, because they were very kind, loving people who helped everyone around them, realized it didn't match up. And they made an example for me of how should you approach something you're fearful of, even if it's fearful from a religious perspective. Why is it that we continue? So this was the 80s, right? Yeah. So 30 years later, why is it that so much of religion continues to be fearful of finding the facts, of learning the reality? Why is it that it's so much more important to take a little snippet of something that could be horrible and blow it into this giant thing, if the precept is really, which even they would say, the precept is about being good people to your neighbors. I mean, Jesus said that straight up and down. So why are we still in this space 30 years later? And I would say it's probably, obviously 50, 60, 70 years later, because that's just one example. Yeah.
I think it's because we misunderstand the purpose of religion a lot of times, and so I think a lot of people think that the purpose of religion is to answer questions, to provide us with answers. Right? It's an answer book that we turn to, and so it's going to tell us how to respond to every single situation. I mean, you've got whole books of devotionals devoted to that entire concept, that if you read the Bible in just this way, it's going to give you your answer. So a lot of Bibles even have that at the back, right? The answers to your questions. But that's
right. All the questions, and they go to this verse, and it'll tell you.
Here it is. Here's your answer. That's not the purpose of religion. Here's what I think. What
is the purpose of religion?
Okay. This Caleb's.
Also, I'm going to tell you why you're wrong when you're finished. No,
of course you are. Of course you are.
I'm probably going to agree 100%.
Here's what it does. So religion is about the questions, just like we were talking about earlier, where you said, "I'm gonna draw on you, Mark." You said, "I love."
I'm not sure that's a really
questions.
good idea.
That's not a good idea. religion is about the questions, and the Bible is about different people at different points in times asking certain questions, and it's about their own experience of God. So I think one of the biggest mistakes that we make is whenever we think that the Bible is going to be this document that's going to tell us everything we need to know about God, and God is revealed in this document. Well, no, what we're going to find in the Bible is different people's experience of asking the questions and their best attempts at the answers. So it doesn't mean that that everything in there is going to be perfect. It doesn't mean that everything in there is going to be of God. It means that we're going to get people's best guess, people's best guess at their experience. And so I think if we were to approach religion a little bit more like that, like like your parents did, they modeled that greatly, right? And so let's find out what it's about. Let's ask, let's learn. And I think we could use a lot more of that in religion, about learning from one another and about asking questions.
We certainly could, but let's be honest. I mean, the founding of most religions actually is in trying to come up with answers. Well, how did all this stuff around us happen? Well, you see, there was this God, and on the first day, God created. So, I mean, there is some honesty about that religions are almost always founded in trying to answer questions. The problem, I think, is, and you really were alluding to it, is when you decide that you can have the answers rather than recognizing there is beauty in exploring the questions rather than having the answers. And we don't do that nearly enough. And I think churches don't really teach folks to do it. But there is a little bit, I think, and you tell me, a darker underside to why a church wants to tell you there are definitive answers.
Oh, it's about power.
Exactly. And so it strays very much from what religion should ever be.
Of course.
But it's
people in our profession, Mark, that are largely guilty of it, right? They want to hold on to power, and one of the ways you hold on to power is by fear and by like lording beliefs over people. And so this is one of the things that I think is powerful about Stranger Things, because here's what I think Stranger Things is ultimately about. And tell me if you agree with this or not. I think Stranger Things is ultimately about community. And one of the things that is the most powerful is that we see these characters who shouldn't ever be together, all coming together. And they come together and they form this community as they're fighting off these demons from another world. But they create community, and they discover that they actually really need each other and that they're better whenever they're together. And I think that we as society find that too, right? That we really need each other. And certainly as church, that whenever we come together and we learn from each other, we discover that we really need each other and can learn from each other. And so I think we need a lot more of that, learning from each other.
And I agree. I'm going to take that and build on it just a little bit. I think specifically that Stranger Things is about exactly what you said, but it is about that in terms of that community and being in community and accepting people that are very different from us and becoming community is the best way to overcome the negative effects of fanaticism. Because throughout this, we have all these examples of fanaticism, science fanatics, political people in government that are fanatics, other countries that are, and what we see is it's constantly overcome by people creating community, even with and because it's the 80s, of course, the bad guys are the Russians, even though right now be so far set from,
not far-fetched at all.
But to see an American character and a Russian character coming together and trying to overcome what they both collectively realize is a moral wrong that's based on fanaticism, I think is a beautiful thing. And I think you're exactly right. The message is coming together in community and overcoming differences is one of the strongest tools we have for defeating fanaticism.
So are you saying that we should all come together and try and defeat some of the fanaticism we see right now? That's appropriate because music's a key. This is the most 80s thing ever. Music is the key to defeating Vecna. That is the most 80s thing.
It was beautiful, right?
Thanks for bringing that in. A little music.
Absolutely. Well, okay, we could go on and on. I want to also say Nathan, who's been watching live, has pointed out, and honestly, if you don't follow Nathan and read some of his stuff, you should be. He talks about how big of an adjustment some of the stuff we were just talking about are coming out of a fundamental church, but it's a big adjustment. It's also an important and necessary adjustment if we do want to see us all come together. But like I said, we could go on and on, but we probably should not do that right now. Let's take a break and come back to our final segment where you and I go toe to toe to see who can stump our co-host.
Let's do it. Welcome back to the Moonshine Jesus Show. We have been talking about Stranger Things, Season 4, Volume 1. And we are now entering the Make Me Look Stupid segment where we try to stump our co-host. So one of the issues, Mark, with this show, I think, was the Hopper storyline. I think that was the weakest of all the storylines, the one in Russia. That's kind of what I thought. And there's this moment where Hopper is kind of wondering, what his purpose is, and he's wondering. He says something like, "I thought I was cursed, but I'm the curse." And he seems to have this kind of religious moment where he says, religious, I don't know about that, but maybe I'm going to give this prayer thing a try as they're getting ready to face the Demogorgon. And so I wouldn't know what you think about this, Mark. I wouldn't know if you think that the Duffer Brothers are trying to force religion into this to be heavy-handed, or what do you think is going on here as the Hopper's going to face the Demogorgon?
I think, oddly, I think it is their... I think the fact that he makes a call on prayer before he does something that's horribly dangerous is one, a commentary on religion in terms of that there's some magic vending machine in the sky that you can pump prayers into and get the answers that you want. But at the same time, I kind of think that that this is not a either or kind of thing, that they're completely condemning religion. I feel like part of it is them going, whether or not there's this vending machine in the sky is going to answer that prayer, there is something about religion and the idea of pushing that out to the universe that can reground us and fortify us and bring us to the moment in a way that just like focusing on what's happening at this time can't do. That there is some value. I feel like that's part of what they're saying, is that, like, yes, the extremism of religion is, they're almost making fun of that, but at the same time they're kind of saying that doesn't mean there's not value in religion in terms of how it can help us. And I'm going to say religion instead of religion. It's not that there's some value in spirituality in a way that can help us overcome some of the toughest moments of our lives. I mean, what do you what was your take on it?
Yeah, I don't know. He did kind of put his quarter in the vending machine in the sky, and then he got his wish. He goes out and he fights the Demogorgon, and then he wins. But
he didn't do it by just praying. If anything, it's
good. Mark, I'm going to take that. I'm going to take that. Because that's what we need to send. I'm going to take that sentiment right there, and I'm going to send that to all the legislators out there.
Right.
Mark Sandlin is saying that you can't just pray about something; you have to also do something about it. Right. You
Pope
can't
Francis
just do thoughts and prayers. Yeah.
Pope Francis said something like, first you pray about it, then you go and you pray for the hungry, then you go and feed them. That's how prayer works. That's definitely part of, and I feel like that was a commentary maybe that they were making in terms of, and it's the same thing Pope Francis was saying. It's like, don't think that prayer is magical. Like prayer should put you in a spiritual frame of mind to go and do what's necessary to answer those prayers.
Okay, so if it's not good enough coming from Pope Francis, you can also take it from Jim Hopper and from Mark Sandlin.
That's going to change the world right there.
It's going to change the world. It's going to change it.
Well, you have put me to shame because you asked a very insightful and interesting question. I am not going to do that. Don't
ask one. Not insightful at all.
This is a storyline question, and it's bugging the crap out of me. And I just know that you're going to have the answer that's going to make me feel better about this. So, up until this season, the Mind Flayer was the big bad. Like, it was that was giant and over top of the Upside Downs Mall and all of this.
Yes,
we haven't seen it yet. We've even heard that that our big bad this season is like a second in command or something. So it's two questions, but it's almost the same question. Why haven't we seen the Mind Flayer, and will we? I mean, what's going on?
Okay, so this was a topic of conversation in my house as we were talking about the Mind Flayer, because we went and watched. We binged season 4 all the weekend it came out. We started back at season 1, and then we went back and rewatched season 4.
I knew you were the right person to ask this question.
And so here's what we're wondering: is Vecna really the Mind Flayer? Because the Mind Flayer is supposed to be the big bad who's controlling all of this, and this is the first time in Stranger Things that we've got kind of a personified presence in the Upside Down, someone who you can actually attribute some kind of intent to. I mean, for all of season 3, right? It was this human flesh that was breaking down and becoming this huge monster. And so Vecna, you get something from.
Can I ask you a question though?
Okay, follow up.
So the kind of the specialist in Dungeons and Dragons that we get introduced to this season is Eddie Munson, right? And Eddie Munson himself said that our new big bad, and I just blanked on his name.
I'm Vecna.
Yep. Yeah. Is the second in command to the Mind Flayer. Like, he's our specialist in some ways about these things. And he's our, like, maybe they are one and the same, but it feels like the writers are hinting maybe they're not. I don't know.
They certainly are, because
that's what threw me off.
I think they've certainly thrown that out because not only him, but I think Dustin says he's like the general of the Mind Flayer. But we haven't seen it. They've talked about the Mind Flayer, but we've not seen anything of the Mind Flayer. So I don't know. Here's my guess. I think Vecna is pulling the strings. I think that
the Mind Flayer wasn't ever the actual big bad.
I think it's Vecna.
Okay. I can possibly buy into that. If that is the case, I'm going to be really mad at the Duffer Brothers for lying to us for 3 seasons. But, hey, I've seen worse.
We've experienced bigger disappointments than that, Mark.
Absolutely. Much bigger.
Maybe in volume 2, we'll get some kind of an answer.
I hope so. I mean, the reality is volume 2 has a lot to tie up here. They're like you pointed out, there's so many storylines going on that aren't intersecting like we had happen in the first 3 seasons. So I have these probably unrealistic expectations of these last 2 episodes. Like, there's so much I feel like they have to do in these last 2. I don't know if it's possible.
Here's the comforting thing for you, Mark, is that you know that you're basically going to get 2 movies, because each one of these is the length of a movie. You know that you're basically going to get 2 movies worth of explanation. So maybe they can do it. Maybe they can do it in that amount of time. We're going to have to wait and see. We're going to have to wait until July.
Absolutely. And we, I think we have to commit, just like we did last week, we're going to have to commit to coming back and revisiting this, because there are so many questions to be answered. We have,
so many unanswered,
because of our time constraints of this podcast, have left out so many things we could have been talking about, that I think that we can watch these last 2 episodes and figure out if any of that pointing to the things we needed to talk
Is
to.
the Mind Flayer real? Is he coming back? Is he the real big bad? Find out. Don't bother with Stranger Things. Find out on the Moonshine Jesus show whenever we come back and talk about Stranger Things. But we're not going to talk about Stranger Things next week. Next week we've got a news show that we're going to talk about. Mark, you want to tell them what it is?
Yeah, absolutely. So listen, there is this new movie that people are going crazy about. It was kind of undersold to start with, and it's about to come out, I think, even tomorrow, June the 7th, where you can pay for it on some streaming sources for $20 or something like that. And it's called Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. And just a 1-sentence summary of what this is about. An aging Chinese immigrant is swept up in an insane adventure where she alone can save the world by exploring other universes, connecting with the lives she could have led. I think it sounds absolutely fascinating, and there's so much just from that 1 sentence that could possibly need to be unpacked. So I'm excited about it. We need people to watch, right?
Yeah, and so Nathan Hall already has, and I hope the rest of you go and do that too. Here's something that I'm noticing, Mark. We're talking a lot about like alternate dimensions and the multiverse and all this kind of stuff. We're like into that right now.
I think the universe is into that right now. I mean, we're seeing actually a lot of real scientific evidence suggesting that there's something of multi-universe or alternate universe or mirror universes. There's so much right now that's going on that could end up indicating that in some ways, I think life is just reflecting the advancement of what humanity is already moving towards.
Okay, well, let's find out next time, and let's hope that we get something a little more positive than the upside down. I'd be okay if that universe that dimension doesn't exist. But we'll find out. We'll find out more about the universes that do exist, the multiverse that does exist, when we talk about everything, everywhere, all at once next week. But thanks for joining us for today on the Moonshine
Jesus Show. Moonshine Jesus, the rising sky. Moonshine